And so before I start, just a little bit about me. First of all, I tend to speak too fast, so stop me. It's like, so please feel free to stop me. So a little bit about me. Many years ago, I started a company called File Migration, where I've worked with a lot of enterprise applications that have hundreds of tables, thousands of forms, CRM, ERP, insurance, banking, all of those. That's my day job. That keeps me fed. In the last few years, I've been working a lot on open source projects using Node.js, TypeScript, whatever around that. I've written some software for NGOs, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I developed with a 55-inch screen, 4K screen. I strongly recommend that. Just, I don't know how many of you use multiple monitors? Okay. Don't you hate the black boundaries between the screens?
You get window management though, so that's kind of nice.
You just virtually do that before. But the boundaries just, at some point I broke with the boundaries, so I just, 2015 got this, I never looked back, and I my family over there, and my small town was. Okay, I didn't know it was that interesting. So as I was working on many large-scale enterprise applications, a pattern emerged. There's front-end code, there's back-end code, and there's a lot of repeatedness around them. You think many times both on the front-end and on the back-end, and it's up to us as developers to keep those two consistent. I've also seen a lot of boilerplate code being copied around. You do those get, put, post, delete routes, and then you copy and copy and copy with the errors, with the vulnerabilities, again and again. And when you look at it as a concept, like we have an entity, the product in this case, but to work with it, we write something to access database. It's select statements or some kind of ORM, so it goes and reads from the database. There's a lot of code around routing, how to get, put, post, delete. And in the front end, there's a lot of code on getting data from the back end, translating the objects back into meaningful objects, deserializing them from JSON and using them again. And all of that is repeated code that I think should not exist. I think it should all be derived from that definition. We pretty much have everything we need there. So I want to have front-end and back-end code sharing. I want to share types, because there's no point. When I first heard about Node.js, I said, so yes, I can use the same code. So I want to have types, I want to have validations, I want to have authorization. All of those defined once and reused. What I don't want to have vendor locking. Okay, so I want to be libraries that you can use, not some kind of backend as a service that keeps you on hold. I don't like code generations because someone eventually needs to maintain that code, and that's a problem. And I hate boilerplate code, and I don't like config files. All of those JSON schemas, GQL schemas, whatever. I just want code that I can refactor, that I can work with, that I can find references with. So a few years ago, we started playing around with that. We wrote some NGO projects. Specifically, this project called Chagai is a food distribution application we've written for a small food bank in our small town, where food gets distributed by volunteers to people in need. I'm sure you have those all over the world. So we started small and distributed 50 parcels and 200 parcels, and by the end of 2019, we distributed 17,000 parcels with 7 different organizations. We thought we've done something, and then COVID came. And with COVID, food distribution went to a whole new level. And this application was used by all the Israeli NGOs, by the municipalities, by even the army who was giving out food in some cases. And we ended up distributing, going up from 17,000 a year to 17,000 a day. And all of that, for me, was a testament to the scalability of the design and the agility of the design, being able to adapt in real time and to grow in those aspects. Also, having the Israeli army use this application gave me some cool penetration testing and cyber security, so I could sleep at night. And actually won the presidential volunteer award in Israel for this. So we decided, okay, it's time to release it to the world. So we've written some documents and we gave it a funny name. And this is where we put the Hacker News announcements, and these are our stars now. Please give us a star. I second this motion. I gave you a star.
Thanks, man.
And the thing about remult is that it's designed to be a tool in your tool chain. Okay, it's not something that's going to dictate you how you're going to do things. It's something that you're going to use when it helps you, and you don't have to use it in other cases. It doesn't limit you in any way. And you can work with any front end, any back end, any database, any cloud provider. It's just an npm package that you install and use. So what are we going to do today? So I prepared a small to-do app in Angular, and we're going to take that small Angular front-end to-do app and turn it into a full-stack app. We're going to have server-side paging, sorting, and filtering, full CRUD capabilities, validation, server-side application logic. We're going to use Postgres as a database. How many of you use Postgres? Okay, cool. I love it. Authentication, authorization, and if we have enough time, we plan to go also to deploy to the cloud. I plan to do this in 25 minutes. Does that seem realistic to you? Okay, so to quote a very smart guy, let's go and look at the code. So here we have an Angular app. This is the way it looks. And it has a task which represents a row in my task list. Okay, it has an ID, it has a title, and it has completed yes or no. And we have the to-do Angular component. Yeah, I'm going to give it some room. So we have a list of tasks. It represents our tasks. That's the initial state. And we have a new task functionalities that helps us create new tasks. And we have a delete task functionalities that helps us clean up the mess that we've done. And set on completed that sets them all as completed. Reasonable? Cool. Let's go to the HTML. Very basic HTML. We have the form. We have the ng4, and we have those buttons at the bottom. Okay? So this is live coding now, and I really hope it will work. So we want to take this front-end app and make it into a full-stack app. So the first thing we need to do is create a server. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go to my source folder, add a new item, server/index yes, and then I'm going to say const app express, and app listen 3002, that's my port, and console log okay. Okay, so that's a basic Express server. Any questions on 2 lines of code? No, okay, cool. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run npx tsx watch source server. Now, what does it mean? npx, you guys know how to run the package. tsx is simply Node.js running TypeScript. Okay, it's a wrapper around Node that just runs TypeScript on the fly. Watch means watch, and source server is what I want it to watch. So this will provide me hot reloading of my TypeScript as I work. So if I change OK to OK, great, it will refresh and I'll get OK, great. Cool. So once we have our server, the next thing I want to do is set up remult with it. So I'm going to say import remult express, and I'm going to say to express app use remult express. Cool. Not sophisticated, not too complex of a setup to use remult on the back. As you can see, Express uses it. Okay, so we can add everything else that Express supports, we can support as well around. So we have our nice little remult configured over here. Let's start doing the actual work. So our app has a task, and it's the most important thing. And I want to have that type shared between the front end and the back end. So I'm going to add a folder. I'm going to call it shared. And I'm going to drag and drop our task from here to shared. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to drag and drop. Okay, cool. It takes it a second, but it did the work. I'll save everything and it will be working. Cool. So I want this task to be the single source of truth. It wants to be the focal point of everything that is related to rules that are relevant to the task. So to do that, I'm going to decorate it with the entity decorator, telling Remult to use this task to define the database, to define the API routes, to define the default query language. All of this should be derived from this class definition. And at the first stage, I'm going to allow all CRUD capabilities. Later, I'm going to restrict it, but we're going to be starting something now to be flexible. We're also going to tell it the different types of fields. So the first one's going to be auto increment, the second is going to be a string, and the last one is going to be a boolean. Okay? And I'm going to go and register it with our remult express object. So I'm going to say entities, task. And if we look back at the console, we can see that we have a new line over here saying API tasks, which means we have routes already registered and ready for us. Okay? Let's take a look at those. So I'm going to go and say new request, and I'm going to say get API tasks, and I get an empty array of tasks. Okay? Let's change it to post, and give it a body with a title of test, submit, and it will post it and add it to our task array. If I do get, I'll get it back. Okay? Cool, now I haven't configured the database. So before I configure the database, or until I configure the database, remult provides me with a small JSON database that I can use. It stores everything in JSON file, making it very easy to start development. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hijack the task from the front end. So I'm going to copy this array of tasks, delete it from here. So now the front end will not have any task in it. And I'm going to copy and paste that array to our request, which I'll change to post. And I'll put the array, paste, and send. So now I've put all of these tasks in our database, and if we switch over to our task JSON, we can see all of these tasks were put to our server. Cool?
Cool.
So just by defining this task entity and registering it with remult, I was able to expose the API and get the database functionality. Now let's switch to the front end and use it. Now before I do that, I'm using Angular proxy over here. Are you guys familiar with it? Okay, I'll show you. We can actually configure Angular to proxy requests to another server. That makes it easy for me not to use calls and other complexities. So you need to create this nice little definition file telling it that whenever I say /API, I actually mean go behind the scenes to our 3000 code. So which means if I do here /API/tasks, Angular will forward it to the backend to run the results. Okay. So we're going to go to our to-do component. And in the on init, we're going to say, actually before that, we're going to say const task repo, remult repo of task. Yeah, and don't be const. I'm not in React, I'm Angular. Remult repo of task returns to me an object of type repository of task. Okay, and that type handles all my interaction with the task entity. Okay? So I'm going to use it by saying task repo, find, then items, these tasks equals items. Okay? So I'm calling the find method of task repo, it will return the task and put them in the task array. And as soon as I save it, I got all my tasks in the front end. Okay? And if you take a look at the network tab, we can see that it's all just normal REST API calls. Okay? I'm going to use my water. It's dry over there. Okay.
This.
Yeah, let's see how my voice will prevail this presentation. So, very easily, I can use the same task type that I was using at the backend to define my APIs and everything in the front end to get data from the backend. Now, it actually comes in with pretty powerful capabilities. I can say here, limit 3, and it will go and get me only the top 3. These functionalities that everybody needs in every endpoint. We need paging, so why do we implement it again and again? So I can say limit 3 and page 2, or page 3, and get the relevant data. And we'll get to see down here, these are all standard REST API calls. Okay? I can order by, and it will order by ascending, again on the back end, putting the setup last, or descending, putting it on top. I can filter using where, say completed true, or false, or undefined. When we say undefined, it will show us everything. Okay, so again, just by defining the task entity, we got a fully typed query language that we can use from the front end to query from the back end. Basically, we looked at our application and we saw these repeating patterns. We said, hey, why the hell do we implement them again and again? Why not just standardize it and just, take it to go? And so after we've done reading, let's go and start changing. Let's support adding a task. So we're going to say over here, await, task repo, insert. again, using typing, everything is typed, but now when I add a new task, it will make a post call to the backend, which you can see over here, and it will post a new task. And if I want to clean up, I'll do delete. And now I'll be able to delete my new task, and I'm sure you'll be surprised where it sends a delete code to the backend and deletes the data. Okay. Let's also implement saving the changes that we do over here. So I'm going to say async save task. Try, catch, alert, error, message, organize. I'm going to say await, task repo, save of task. Okay? And if we'll go to our HTML, I'm going to call this save when we change the checkbox. And when we blur from the input. Okay, so now if I set these values, you can see that put requests are being sent to the backend and change the value. This is actually where the JSON database becomes useful, because if I find the file, we can see in real time that it changes. True, false, yay. Okay, so again, same definition. One entity, and we get full stack CRUD capability. Query language and everything included, CRUD from the front end, API, backend, database, and pretty much everything around it. Now, what you're seeing right now has been working for a very long time in multiple apps. We're very proud of it and we like it very much. What I'm going to show you next was released Sunday. Okay. Version 0.18 of remult was just released because I wanted to get it done before I come here. We haven't yet announced it even because we haven't completed the release notes. But if you go to our website now, you'll see the tutorials that include this. And what I'm going to show you talks about the following problem. Our user liked the application so much, he gave it to some other user. So the other user opened the application and they started making changes. And our first user said, but they don't see those changes. They need to refresh to see those changes, which you and I know is that, but the users don't understand why. They think that we've changed the same data, why don't we see the updates? And that's complex and annoying to implement. So the thing about remult is, we didn't invent the wheel, we didn't solve any unsolved problems, we just made them easier to solve, more accessible. So if you look at this use case, let's switch over to our to-do component and try to make this reactive. So instead of using find, I'm going to use live query. Instead of using then, I'm going to use subscribe. And I'm going to wrap the items in an object. Okay, subscribes give me back an updated array of items that I can use. It has a few more helper methods, but we're going to stick to that part. I'm also going to define unsubscribe. Call it now destroy, and set it with the results of the subscribe. Okay? Make sense? And that's pretty much it. So now if I set the text box, the checkbox, you see that it's set on both tabs. And let's actually try to make this more impressive. We can do this, and it all works. So we didn't really create anything new, we didn't invent any protocols that we're using in the development mode. We can use server-side events, which is stream over HTTP, you can work with any firewall, very simple to set up. And when you grow to scale, you can use industry standard tools such as Ably or PubSub or others that can just solve it at a normal scale. What I think we bring to the table is making this accessible. You just define a query, subscribe to its results, and you'll get the relevant output it's going to be. So, we've done, don't need to test, we've done setup, entities, paging, CRUD, and live query. Validation is another one of those concerns that I see spread across code. You have validations on your phone, okay? That says, are users here was adding a lot of empty tasks and you want to save them from doing that. So you write some kind of front-end validation, but you also want to validate your API. So you write some back-end validations, and again, repeating code, things that I don't want to repeat. In remult, we believe that everything should be in one source of truth. So in this entity, I can define validate, and I'm going to say validators.require. And as soon as I do that, I'll get validation. So if I try to add this task, I will get the children will be empty. Okay? But take a look at the network tab. It didn't go to the backend. It's happening completely on the front end. So I have front-end validation working. But let's try to bypass it and go to the backend. So I'm going to go over to our request, and I'm going to try to make a post with an empty title. And I'm going to get the same validation when I make the API call. Okay? And I also get a structured validation error with the different fields that gave me the error, so I can create a compelling UI for my user. Okay, so we can highlight which fields have failed and what was the failure. And it doesn't have to be built-in validations, it can be any error function. So I can say here task, and task, if task, task, title, length, less than 3, throw, arrow to short. Okay, so now when I click add, I'll get the 2 short arrow here and also on the backend. So the same validation code runs both in my front-end bundle and in my backend Node.js. Cool. Next, my user, first of all, let's delete this ugly task that we don't need. Too short. Okay, yeah, because I'm blurring. Yeah. And actually deleted the one that I want the most, so let's add it here again. I'm using my app. Cool, actually that just reminded me of something which I skipped earlier in the live query. When we use live query, the functionalities that updates the UI based on other users' input, it also sends the updates to us, which can result in a cute bug. When you add an item, you get it added twice, because I get one from the stream and one when I added it myself to the array. So I'll just fix that by going to the to-do component, and when I'm adding a task, I'm going to remove the push because I don't need it anymore. Okay? Cool. And so, my user is a bit lazy, and he said I want to be able to set all the tasks as completed in one go. Okay, so I talk to the user, we do a meeting, we have a use case, what are you trying to do? I want you to iterate over all the tasks and click the button for me. So I'll do just that. I'm going to go to a set all completed. I'm going to write a for task await task repo find, because I want to iterate all the tasks, not just the ones that are downloaded in my specific page. And then I'm going to do await task repo save task completed. Okay? And as I do that, I'll click set all completed, and it will slowly but surely work. Okay? And that's actually a fun fact. Does any of you use proxy? None of you use proxy. So this is actually a bug of proxies that it works so slow. If sometimes something works too slow for you with Angular, just change the URL to 127.0.0.1, and you'll see that it runs much faster. So it's a big performance tip. I strongly recommend that in development. Anyhow, I'm happy. My user is happy. My boss, not so much, because he looks at the network tab and said, "Are you crazy? Look at how many calls are you making? There's only 11 tasks and you're making so many calls. This should never work like this." And I said, okay, don't worry. Give me 20 seconds. Let's move that to the backend. So I'm going to go to our shared folder, and I'm going to define a tasks controller. And it's going to be export class tasks controller, and just a class, innocent looking class. And we'll go and I'll copy our method from here to there, and I'll just make it start. Okay? And I'll decorate it with something that is called backend method decorator. The backend method decorator tells remult that if you're about to run this code in the front end, don't. Make an API call to the backend because it needs to run over there. Okay? And by saying allow true, I'm actually saying which users are allowed to run it. Later we'll use that in more context. So now that I'm in the backend, I need to define the task repo. It's going to be remult repo of task. Just like we did in the front end, okay? We get an object repository of type task that is in charge of interacting with the task itself. But if in the front end it was making REST API code for the backend, when it's running on the backend, it's making database codes for the database. Okay, if it's the JSON file, Postgres, Mongo, SQL, Oracle if you're a result design. And instead of task repo, of this task repo, let's remove the this. So that's it. We took the code that we've written in the front end and we just move it to one in the back end. Now let's go ahead and register it with our API. So I'm going to say here controller is task controller. And as soon as we do that, we can see that a new route was added. And to use this in the front end, all we need to do is say, instead of this for loop, await task controller, set all completed, completed. That's it. Okay? So now if I clear the network tab and I do set all uncompleted, you see one API call. And it was all running in the backend. This kind of flexibility of code between the front end and the back end opens a huge window for use in all sorts of contexts. You can do it where some of the code runs in the front end, some in the back end, some based on a condition will run like this or like that. And you also get type checking between the front end and the back end. Okay, I would always get typing wrong when I'm calling the back end. That's just me. Wrong. If I change this to a string, I will get compile time error in my type string. I'm using the same type signature to check. Cool, so we've done setup, entities, paging, CRUD, live, validation, backend method. Time to graduate our database. So far we've been using our JSON file, it's been serving us well, but we need to scale. And changing the database can be traumatic to some applications, but we try to keep it to a minimum. So I'm going to switch over to our index, to our API endpoint, and I'm going to say import from remult Postgres. And I'm going to say that the data provider is a Postgres connection. And the connection string is a connection string that I've prepared in advance. And that's it. Now our application works with Postgres. How do we know that? We know that because we don't have any data. It's a good way to know that. And if we actually look at the console, we can see that it created a table for us. Okay? Now, by default, we use something called ensure schema. It goes and checks if the table exists, if it doesn't, it creates it, if the column exists, if it doesn't, create it. It's a very naive approach to migrations, but I like developing naive code that works. But of course, you can disable it and run migrations as complicated as you like. Okay? But for now, we have our data in our database. Now let's go back and put some data in there. And I'm going to undo it until I get my array again. And send it, and the data was posted, and it's now in the database. Okay? And we can actually go to this utilities. It shows me the SQL database. And it has time. Need to reflect that in the API, and need to reflect that also in the front. Right? Now, we are not offering an authentication solution. Brighter people than us have done that. There are so many authentication implementations that exist out there. What we bring to the table is your ability to define in a declarative way the authentication and authorization rules you want to use. So, for example, I want to say here that the task entity is only available for someone who is authenticated. And as soon as I do that, I don't see my data anymore because guess what? I'm not authenticated. Okay, so I get an error in my network tab saying you're not authenticated, you cannot access this data. Okay? And just like we've done here, we can also do the same for the backend method. We can say that the backend method can only run for users who are authenticated. Okay? Now, there's a lot of authentication implementation. I'm going to implement a very basic one using cookie session, completely external to remult just to get something running here in the demo. So let me do that really quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a cookie session, which we have over here, with a secret that is very secret, don't tell anyone. And we've defined a list of valid users. Now, of course, in the real application, this will either come from Google, GitHub, Facebook, or a database table, whatever you want. And we've defined a sign-in route that gets Sign in finds the user, and if he found it, returns it, and if he doesn't, it gives an error. Now I'm using standard express routes here. I could have used backend method just like I've done before, but I'm using standard express route here to demonstrate that you don't have to use remult. You can use whatever is easiest for the test you're trying to do. Whatever remult saves you time, use it. Whenever it doesn't, use anything else. And we have sign out. It does quite simply set the user to null and current user set over here. And in the front end, I'm going to use something that I've prepared in advance. And I go to our app component. And instead of using the app to do, I'm going to use the app auth. And let's review that component. Go to definition. No, okay. I'm going to go to our auth component. So auth component has a sign-in username and has a sign-in method. And again, to show the agility, I'm using HTTP client to post a request to the URL we just defined. If the result is okay, we're telling remult that this is your user and we clear the sign-in username. We have sign out to sign out and only need to check the current user. Okay? And the HTML is quite basic. Okay? So now we have sign in and sign out functionality, which will go probably after I'll save everything. Yay! So we're signed in as Steve, but we still don't see the data. That's because we never told remult to put the user in. We've created a whole authentication method with sessions and frontend and whatever, but we still need to tell remult on the backend to the user is. So let's go back to our API. And here we'll say get user. So when the remult needs to get the user, he will go to request, session, user. Just like we've done everywhere else here. Here, and here. Okay? So when I do that, and add a comma, because that's kind of mandatory, remult will know who the user is and give me the data.